This podcast is part of Pearson's professional development series for reading and writing instructors.
Joya Lafoon-Jackson, Hopkinsville Community College in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, and the title of this podcast is Purposeful Punctuation. Hi, my name is Joya Lafoon-Jackson. I'm the Developmental Writing Coordinator at Hopkinsville Community College in Kentucky, and today I'd like to share with you an efficient and meaningful system that I developed for teaching punctuation to my students. You know, if you look at the punctuation chapters in any textbook, you'll see pages of information on when to use the comma, when to use the semicolon, when to use the dash, and so on. In other words, what we've been doing for years now, actually, is categorizing the rules of punctuation according to the punctuation marks themselves. Now, this method makes sense to those of us who teach English because we understand the underlying purposes behind all of these punctuation marks. However, our developmental writing students typically do not. I have found that students grasp the whole framework of punctuation much more readily when I teach them to categorize the rules by their purposes rather than by the punctuation marks. First, I begin by explaining that they need to determine their purpose for a sentence by asking themselves these three questions. 1, am I trying to convey more than one complete thought? 2, do I have a list of items in this sentence? And 3, does extra information interrupt my main sentence or come before it or after it? By getting them to ask themselves these questions about each sentence, the students then begin to come to the realization that there are three primary purposes for punctuation, and those three purposes are to separate two complete sentences, to separate items in a series, and to separate extra information from the main sentence. So the next thing I do is show them how to categorize punctuation rules under the appropriate purpose. I ask my students to tell me 3 ways that they can separate two complete sentences. Now, because this is a topic we've already covered earlier in the term when we studied run-on sentences and how to avoid them, they're quite pleased with themselves that they already know the 3 punctuation rules that go under the first purpose of punctuation. They know that to separate two complete sentences, they can either put a period and a capital letter between the two sentences, or put a semicolon between them, or put a comma before a coordinating conjunction between the two sentences. So then we move on to the second purpose of punctuation, which is separating items in a series. Here again, students usually know one of those punctuation rules already, and then I simply teach them the other 2. The one that they know is that they need to put a comma between each item in the series. And then the other 2 that I teach them are to put a colon between a complete sentence and a series, and to alternate the comma and the semicolon when you have a series within a series. The third and final purpose of punctuation is to separate the extra material from the main sentence. I explain to my students that the location of the extra information in relation to the main sentence itself determines which rule is used. So rule number 1 is when the extra information comes before the main sentence, you simply put a comma between the extra information and the sentence to separate them. Number 2, when the extra information slightly interrupts the main sentence, put a pair of commas around the interruption. Number 3, when the extra information strongly interrupts the main sentence, put either a pair of dashes or a pair of parentheses around the interrupter. And number 4, when the extra information appears after the main sentence is over, use a comma to separate the main sentence from the extra part. However, if the extra information needs special emphasis, you use a dash instead of a comma. And there you have it, a simple, efficient system for teaching punctuation. Through examples and practice exercises, you'll find that your developmental students can indeed master the 3 primary purposes for punctuation and all 10 rules that go with them. And then once they've mastered those, you can go on to teach them minor purposes for punctuation and the rules that accompany them. Thank you.
For more podcasts and other resources, please visit Pearson's professional development community site at www.englishinstructorexchange.com.